Obviously, I still don't sound great. I'm sure I'll have to mute a coughing fit or 2 or 3 or 10 as we go throughout this segment here with Kyle Hunter of HunterSportsPicks.com for our second Handicapping the Hardwood segment of the week. But I didn't want to leave you hanging going into the weekend here. Obviously, doing better than I was on Monday and doing better than I was over the previous 3 days here. But before I bring Kyle onto the show, I just want to send out some thanks to everybody that's checked in, some thanks to everybody that said that they've missed the show, and those that have said that, hey, we'll still be here whenever you get back. It certainly means a lot to me. Every time I coughed between 11 and 12, I just felt angrier and sadder inside because I wasn't doing the show here for you guys. So, I'm very, very sorry about this. It's really the only time I've gotten sick while doing the daily show here on Bang the Book Radio, and it's not something I've taken lightly, not something that I've enjoyed by any means, but happy to get back to the program here today. And hopefully by Monday, we'll be back to normal and I can go through the Monday mailbag with a little bit, better of a show that I had here this previous Monday. So make sure you send me your questions for the Monday mailbag at Skating Tripods on Twitter or Adam@BangTheBook.com via email. Then we'll have another segment with Kyle coming up here on Monday. Over at BangTheBook.com, we are your one-stop shop for sports betting news and information. Lots of great stuff going on over there. My writers have been picking me up this week. Kyle's been picking me up on YouTube as well. So thanks and gratitude to those guys that continue to do a fine job day after day after day over there at the website. The daily college basketball picks from Kyle Hunter, the daily NHL picks from Parker Michaels, daily NBA stuff from Admir Algic and Alan Moody. A lot of people doing great work over there. I can't thank them enough for that. Obviously, here, this bout with pneumonia has pushed back my MLB betting guide a little bit, trying to get, make up some ground with that, trying to get things going with that. So hopefully we'll have that out here very, very soon. But I promise you I'm working hard to get back on track here after being sick. Finally, as you know, this and every edition of Bang the Book Radio presented by our friends over at DSI Sportsbook. BTB200 is that promo code, 100% deposit match bonus for the Sportsbook, 100% deposit match bonus for the live casino at BetDSI. It's only a game until you bet it. One guest on the program here today, that is my good buddy and our good friend Kyle Hunter from HunterSportsPicks.com for our Handicapping the Hardwood segment. Kyle, how's it going today, man?
Doing well, man. Happy that you're doing at least better than you were the other day.
Yeah, excuse me. Man, I don't know how the hell I got through that Monday show. In retrospect, after thinking about it here throughout the week, I have no idea how I got through it, but would have just been way too tough Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So, again, hopefully kind of getting back on track here a little bit. And you and I are going to get back on track by talking about one of the conferences we haven't touched on yet. That is the Patriot League. A couple of teams that have done some interesting things on the national landscape here recently.
Yeah, the Patriot League is a little bit better than most people would think. Some of these other conferences we've talked about have been pretty low to where, it'd be hard to imagine anybody giving anybody a hard time in the big dance. I think the Patriot League's a pretty decent league, at least compared to what people might think. You think about Lehigh having that good run a few years ago. Bucknell is giving people a hard time, certainly. And, Bucknell and Lehigh are two of the favorites again this year. Colgate, the other top team in this league. This league is 70-67 ATS in their last 137 non-conference contests. Not a great league by any means, but certainly not a bad league. To me, this league is a lot different than some of the other bottom-tier leagues. And the biggest reason for that is there's no terrible teams in this league. You don't see any team ranked 350 or 348 or something like that, on Bart Torvik's site or Ken Palm or anywhere. This is a league that's very closely bunched together. There are three top teams in Lehigh, Colgate, Bucknell. After that, though, the rest of the teams, it's really hard to rank them. There's a lot of pretty even teams. If you look at Ken Palm, he ranks this league third in the nation in most tight games, and that's games that finish at less than 4 points or overtime. So a lot of really close games here in the Patriot League. Part of that has to do with a decent amount of these teams play pretty slowly, but still quite a bit of it has to do with the fact that there's no bottom feeder in this league.
Well, and I think one of the reasons why the Patriot League does have some measure of success is that this is a league where these teams play, for the most part, smart basketball. You look at the foul rates in this conference, nobody fouls a ton. Nobody turns the basketball over a ton except for Navy. You got a lot of teams that just don't really hurt themselves. They just don't have the talent to compete, but they don't turn the ball over. They don't foul. They make a lot of their free throws. There's some pretty good free throw shooting teams in this league. That allows you to kind of hang around when you're facing that talent disparity.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the turnover thing is really important because, like you said, Navy's the only team that's even really that bad at all. Nobody else, even in the bottom 100 in the country in turnover rates. So, that's pretty impressive. So a lot of teams here taking care of the basketball, like you said, not much fouling going on. And, we see in some of the other conferences that we've talked about, the bottom tier leagues, that there is just a ton of fouling and turnovers. That not being the case here can definitely keep you in games. There's no doubt about that. You're not giving the other team free points on the line, and you're also not giving them free extra opportunities by turning it over. So, you keep it to a relatively low-scoring game with some decent defense, not fouling that much, and taking care of the basketball. Then you've got a league that is capable of, at least worrying somebody. I think that it would be a little bit of a surprise if somebody other than Bucknell, Colgate, or Lehigh is the team that wins this conference. And I think if one of those teams win this conference, then you at least have a team that a top-ranked team would not be too excited to play.
So as you look at this conference, and as you mentioned here, it is a little bit top-heavy with those three teams. Who is on top for you of Bucknell, Lehigh, and Colgate? How do you rank those three teams?
Well, Bucknell's recent success makes me have them first. I think that they've proven they have a good quality program, a good coach. They haven't been as good this year as they were last season. Still a fairly experienced team, not as much experience as they had last year. But Bucknell played fairly well in a non-conference slate. They had a real chance of beating Ohio State in Columbus. I remember that game pretty well. They beat UNLV on a neutral by 25 points. They beat Rhode Island on a neutral. Obviously, Ohio State's not a great team. UNLV and Rhode Island are not that good. But, that's a pretty good win, especially when you're winning by 25 points against UNLV. So they also beat LaSalle on the road by 13 points. And then the most impressive win of all was at Vermont by 8 points. So Bucknell played a relatively tough non-conference schedule. They've been here the last couple of years to the big dance. They came really close to beating Michigan State last year. So, this Bucknell team a couple of years ago also gave West Virginia a hard time. I forgot about that game, so I just looked now. But Bucknell, you have to rate them first. To me, Colgate's second. If you look at Lehigh's really impressive when it comes to offense. Not very good at defense. Look at what Colgate's done against what Lehigh has done against the other top teams. Lehigh has lost both games against Colgate by 13 and then by 22. And then they lost to Bucknell at home by 2 and lost to Bucknell on the road by 12. So while Lehigh has been beating up on the smaller teams in this league, or the teams that aren't as good in this league, they haven't been able to beat the top teams, and that concerns me about them. What I like about Colgate's really trending in the right direction. They've played really well here of late, won 5 straight games. They beat Lehigh on the road by 22 points. They went to American and won in overtime. That's probably the 4th best team in this league. And then they beat Bucknell by 11 points at home. So Colgate's certainly trending in the right direction. So I would say, Bucknell, the top team based on the past, Colgate second ranked, then Lehigh, the third-ranked team. And I think those three are pretty easily clear of the rest of the pack here.
So you said that it looks like American, probably, fairly clearly the 4th best team here in this league. So are the rest of the teams just kind of interchangeable from that point on?
Yeah, to me, I think that, from Army all the way down to, which I had Army after American, and then down to Navy, I'd say Navy is definitely the worst team in this league, largely because of their turnover issues. But everybody in this league has the potential of beating everybody else in this league. This is not a situation where you've got one team that is that much worse than anybody else. I'll put American next after that, and fourth, then Army. Boston U, I think Boston U has more potential than they've shown so far this year. If you look at their body of work and how they've played in some of those non-conference games, they've given some teams a difficult time. They've won at Colgate 76-68 also. This is a team that gave Rutgers a hard time on the road, nearly beat Vermont at home. I think Boston U is a better team than they have shown. They're 12-16 this year. They're a very inexperienced team. I think they're playing a little bit better here of late. So I would put them next. Holy Cross. Holy Cross is always an interesting team to play against. They play that style of slow it down and a lot of back cuts there with Bill Carmody at the head. He used to coach at Northwestern, so you know what you're going to get when you play Holy Cross, and it's not a very easy win. So to me, Holy Cross is a difficult team to play against. And then you've got Loyola Maryland and Lafayette as well. And then I have Navy as the last team here in this league.
All right, so we'll take an extended look at the Patriot League before their conference tournament. And obviously the conference tournament's, very very close together this year. I remember last year we had some conference tournaments that actually kicked off in February. And this year, everything in March, and really everything from, I think it's March 3rd to March 17th or so, as we head into Selection Sunday. So conference tournament's going to be very bunched up this year. We'll try to cover as many of them as we can here on the show, obviously, and then, of course, over at BangTheBook.com as well. All right, so let's get into our fade and follow segment here, look at a couple of teams. And, again, sometimes these are short-term fades, sometimes these are long-term fades, or short-term follows or long-term follows. Let's start on the fade side here with a team that we have talked about a little bit here recently.
Yeah, let's talk about a CAA team here in the College of Charleston. Charleston was a co-favorite in this league. A lot of people thought that they could win this league. They have some really good veteran leaders in Jarrell Brantley and Grant Riller. I feel like those guys have played pretty well this year. Brantley's three-point percentage is only 29.3%. That's not really what he does the best. And, you could argue that maybe 99 three-point attempts from him is too many. Riller's put up some big games, even in some of their losses. But they're not quite as deep as it appeared they might be. And I think that at this point, College of Charleston, they've got to be at least a little bit disappointed with this regular season here at 10-6 in the league. Hofstra at 13-2, way clear of them. Charleston has 2 games left here in the regular season in the CAA. They play at Elon, and they play home against UNC Wilmington. They beat both of those teams the first time they played them. I think that they may be a good fade here in these last 2 regular season games, because if you look at it, what does Charleston have to play for in these regular season games? Now, I don't know that they would care very much about these games, because Charleston is a team that's capable of winning the CAA tournament, but they're not going to do anything by winning these last couple games. These games don't matter to them. So I think it's all about the conference tournament to them. And then you look at what they just did in the last couple games. They had 2 straight games go to overtime. So they played overtime win against against Northeastern. They actually had a close, tough loss against Hofstra right before that. Then they have an overtime win against Northeastern, and then an overtime loss on the road against William and Mary. So, between the fact that they don't have much to play for and the fact that they've played 2 OT periods in a row, I'd like to go against Charleston here going forward.
Yeah, I like this one a lot, and this is something you want to keep in mind here with these teams in these one-bid leagues where, like you said, the last 2 regular season games don't really matter a whole lot to them, and it takes on an extra layer with Charleston because the conference tournament is in Charleston, South Carolina. It's not on their campus, but it's in their, home city. So it's not like they're playing to host this conference tournament or anything like that. They know, hey, we're going to be close to home for this thing no matter what happens for us. So that sort of gives them a little bit more peace of mind as well, to the point where all of their focuses are going to be on that conference tournament. So in those one-bid leagues, that is something you want to look for here where, teams realize, hey, maybe we underachieved the regular season or whatever else, but this is our one shot, and we know it, and everybody knows it. So College of Charleston is one of those teams that kind of fits that mold of what we talk about year in and year out, of teams that, may punt the end of the regular season just to get ready for that conference tournament.
Yeah, to be honest with you, as a broader thought, I think that's one of the best ways you can handicap these last few games in these smaller conferences is to try to look at teams that may be disappointed that don't really care about these last few games. Try to go against those teams, especially if they're decent teams who are supposed to be really good teams. You wonder how much incentive they really have for games like this. I think that's, probably one of the best ways to handicap sides here, especially in the small conferences here. As we go forward at the end of the season, these teams are really close to the end of their regular season. And, I think that's something that's a broader handicapping theme that you should keep in mind. And, that's something that would be a lot better to be betting on right now than, say some people say, well, these bubble teams have to win, or, that must-win situation that we talk about in college football. That's one that you'd want to be careful of. This is one that I think that you should be paying attention to.
And even to sort of draw a parallel to another sport that's going on here, spring training baseball starts today. Coaches understand, what's at stake. They understand their teams. They have a good pulse for their teams to say, hey, you know what? I want to work on ball movement. I want to work on, passing the ball around the perimeter, making sure that we get open shots. Maybe that team's all of a sudden going to use up a big bulk of the shot clock. Or, hey, I want to commit to trying out this new man-to-man defense, or put so-and-so on so-and-so. This is the time of year when you would want to do that, the time of year when you want to experiment with those things before the conference tournament. So maybe these teams win. Maybe they don't cover numbers as a favorite or something like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good time to test things out, especially if you've had a little bit of a disappointing season. Maybe you decide, let's put in a 2-3 zone, or let's put in a 1-3-1 zone look that we haven't played with all year. If you can read something on that before the game, that's something that'd be fantastic to look to bet on. If somebody's going to put in a zone or something like that, maybe look to play an under. Sometimes you'll get some little tidbits by reading from beat writers or reading quotes from coaches. Usually they're not going to tell you too much about, what they want to put in as far as that, because they don't want the other team to know. But sometimes you'll read something as far as, we need to slow the pace down, we need to speed things up. It's another reason to be following beat writers and looking for those little tidbits that, aren't going to be widely available.
Well, and also, too, as we get closer here to the conference tournaments and, as I feel better and get back to work a little bit more, something else to look into here is that, in some of these conference tournaments, not everybody makes it. So you do have teams fighting for a spot in the postseason or fighting for seeding, because there are some important advantages with that. We'll talk more about those things as we go forward here on the show. But if you want to do some of your own research with that as well, and sort of look for some of those conference opportunities where, if it's in a small conference, the odds makers aren't really paying too much attention to that. If a team is playing the team that's in last place and they need that win to move up into a spot for the conference tournament, there's a lot more of a motivational edge there that may not be milked into the numbers. So it's very important to look at those things with the small conferences at this time of the year.
Yeah, I agree with that one. I would say the one caveat to that, and this, and we've talked about it before in college football, as long as you think that team cares and wants to be in the postseason, there probably are going to be some teams who have some chemistry issues, some teams who, were supposed to be good that are way down at the bottom of the pack that may not even make the conference tournament. Maybe they've just kind of checked out for the season. In general, though, I think that's certainly a good betting angle that, most teams are going to want to get another shot. Most people don't want their season to be over. So especially in these smaller conferences, I think that's a good angle to look for.
All right, so we move over here from the fade team to the follow team in the Ohio Valley Conference.
Yeah, Tennessee Martin. I've followed them here pretty closely in recent games because I try to look for tempo changes, and Tennessee Martin's a very clear tempo change. I've said before, a great way to look at these, Bart Torvik's website has this line graphs to where you can look and see what kind of pace they've been playing at at the beginning of the season through now, you can even change, just to look at only conference games. You can look at only road games. You can look at home games, things like that. You can see that Tennessee Martin has clearly slowed the game down. Obviously you can see that on multiple sites. They were playing for quite a while, consistently games in the mid-70s in tempo. They haven't had a game faster than 70 since January 17th as far as tempo, despite the fact they've played some teams that play very quickly and even gotten into some foul fests here at the end against Southeast Missouri State and SIU Edwardsville. So Tennessee Martin clearly playing a lot slower than they were. That's helped it. I think part of the reason is they were having turnover problems. They've been able to take care of the basketball a little bit better here of late. It also seems like, those lower scoring games benefit them because they don't have enough firepower on offense to keep up with a lot of these teams in the OVC. There's some pretty good offenses in the OVC. Tennessee Martin's biggest strength is offensive rebounding. A team that's really good down in the low post offensive rebounding usually is not a team that's going to win a lot of really high-scoring games that are just up and down constantly. Tennessee Martin has changed the way they play, and it's really helped them a lot. I think they're playing quite a bit better than they were earlier this season. They've won 4 of their last 5 games. The other one was against Murray State on the road, and they only lost by 10 in that one, so a respectable showing there. The other thing, if you look at their last 3 games here in the regular season, look who they're playing. Austin Peay on the road. Well, they lost by 2 at home against them, so a chance for road revenge. I don't think they'll win that game, but they're going to be a pretty big underdog there. And then they play Belmont at home. They lost to Belmont on the road by 15. Again, I don't think they'll win that game, but you would think they'd be motivated for that game. And then they play Tennessee State at home. They just lost to Tennessee State on January 31st by 1 point right at the end of the game. So they have 3 chances for revenge here, and they're certainly playing quite a bit better than they were.
I love that, and that's one of the reasons why we focus so much on these under-the-radar conferences here on the show, because that's something that I wonder if the odds makers will pick up on, the tempo change, especially in a conference where you do have a lot of high-scoring games. And also, like you said, just because it's a road revenge spot doesn't mean that we need them to win the game outright. It just means that we need them to play well enough to cover the number. And they're going to be getting doubles in both of those games against Austin Peay and Belmont. They will be a favorite against Tennessee State. And, I can't remember offhand. I think the OVC, I don't think they take everybody for the conference tournament, so maybe that game winds up really mattering for the Skyhawks. But great team, great one to isolate here on today's show. And one of the reasons why I think that, this segment specifically is separated so much from everything else you're going to find out there in this business.
Well, that's always the goal, is to talk about some of these under-the-radar things that you're not going to hear anywhere else. I don't think many people at all are going to be talking about Tennessee Martin, especially about their tempo change. So, that it's those little under-the-radar things that can help you make a little bit extra money when it comes to college basketball. This is not a sport like the NFL where everybody knows about every single team. This is college basketball, and there's 353 teams. You need to try to do your best to take advantage of that.
All right, so let's take a look here at some games for this weekend. Plenty of games, obviously a loaded card coming up here on Saturday. Once again, though, I am bummed that you didn't pick any Ivy League games for tonight.
Yeah, if you want some Ivy League games to talk about, you're going to have to suggest them, because I'm never going to be suggesting Ivy League.
All right, well, hopefully next Friday, by then I should feel up doing videos over on our Bang the Book YouTube page, and I'll do my Ivy League picks for next Friday, but make sure you check out Kyle's video here later today, previewing the Saturday college basketball card over on our Bang the Book YouTube page. But I imagine this game has a pretty good chance of showing up there. Big-time matchup in the SEC, Tennessee and LSU is how we'll start it off.
Yeah, first of all, LSU was in a really bad spot in their last game. LSU coming off road wins at Kentucky and then at Georgia. I didn't want to bet Florida the other night. I was trying to find reasons not to bet them. I had them as a lean early on, and then finally the line got to +7, 7.5 different places, and I did end up taking Florida, thankfully. I watched a lot of that game, Florida and LSU. I didn't really think that Florida was that great. It was more LSU was very sloppy in that game. They definitely were not playing a good basketball game there. They think that was both a letdown spot from their road trip and a look-ahead spot, playing against Tennessee. And Florida hasn't been very good this year. Florida was able to upset them on the road there. Now you get Tennessee coming in. You would think that LSU is going to give them a good punch here because, disappointing loss for them. LSU has plenty of talent. I don't think LSU is worse in terms of talent than is Tennessee. And Tennessee's been a good team this year. We'll give Rick Barnes credit on how they've done in the regular season. As I've said many times in the past, I want to see him do it in the postseason before I trust him. I don't trust this Tennessee team, even when they were number one all those weeks. Didn't think that they would necessarily be a team that would be in, say, the final game or even the Final Four. Certainly they could be, but they won't be in my Final Four in my bracket. They'll have to prove it before I put them at that point. This is a big game for Tennessee as well, though, because Tennessee goes on the road to Kentucky, loses by 17 points. If you look at what they've done on the road, other than that, I mean, they won at Florida by 11 points in a game that Florida was ahead for quite a bit of that game, and then Florida just completely fell apart at the end of the game. I wouldn't say that Tennessee's schedule has been overly difficult, especially in road games so far this year. That win at Memphis, I guess, is an okay win, 102-92. Memphis is not a great team. The AAC is pretty weak. Certainly their impressive win of the year is the Gonzaga win on a neutral. To me, this is a huge game for Tennessee in that, a lot of people were pretty quick to throw them out the window when they lose to Kentucky the way they did. And, I don't necessarily blame people, but it was one game. Let's see what Tennessee does here. Tennessee is going to put up a lot of effort. LSU is going to put up a lot of effort here. I think this is going to be a good game. I think LSU has a pretty decent home court advantage, a good fan base. Certainly they're more of a football school than a basketball school, but they have some passion down there for sports in general. I think LSU is the side that I prefer in this one. I'm curious to see where this line opens. I see Ken Palm has this one at Tennessee by 2. Bart has this one at Tennessee by 1. I don't think we'll get LSU plus 2. I think that, maybe pick them or plus 1 at best. I think that Ken Palm's number is a little bit too high here, so I'm curious to see where this line comes out. I think this is a really big game for both teams in that, Tennessee has something to prove, LSU in a bounce-back spot. To me, I lean toward the LSU side, like I said. I think LSU is so good down low getting those offensive rebounds. And Tennessee, if you look at their single biggest weakness, it is defensive rebounding. Tennessee has given up a lot of offensive rebounds in some of their games that have been close or in their loss to Kentucky. Kentucky had 12 offensive rebounds in that game. And also, if you look at for the season, Kentucky and LSU are pretty similar when it comes to offensive rebounding, almost exactly the same rank. So I think LSU getting that many second chance opportunities is what makes me lean toward their side here.
Something I noticed here with LSU, over their last 6 games, their best points per possession allowed, 1.057. They've had 4 of their 6 games here. They've allowed over 1.1 points per possession on defense. Is that just what we have to deal with LSU, or is this defensive issue something that is recently popped up?
Well, if you look at LSU last year, this was a team that was really efficient on offense and was really bad on defense. They were 265th in the country in effective field goal percentage defense last year. This year, 183rd. So, they're better than they were last year. But the biggest reason this defense is better than last year in LSU is that they're getting more steals. Waters gets quite a few steals, just about as many as anybody in the country. And Naz Reid, a really good freshman for this team. I think Reid's the main reason that LSU is a lot better than they were last year. 6'10", can step out and shoot the 3, can bang in there and get a lot of offensive rebounds as well. I think he's the biggest reason LSU is a lot better than they were last year. But I do think that LSU is one of those teams that's very efficient on offense, that's only okay on defense. If you look at Tennessee is really efficient on offense. They're pretty good on defense. They're not elite on defense either. They're 40th in the country according to Ken Palm in defensive efficiency. So they're 40th. LSU is 75th. Tennessee has the better numbers overall. Obviously, LSU being at home here makes a pretty big difference also. To me, this should be a great game. I'm really looking forward to this game. Probably won't have a bet on this game, but I do think it's one that you'll want to pay attention to.
using the hell out of this mute button on my headset here, coughing my head off in between talking. But in Florida State game here, and this is a pretty interesting one for a variety of different reasons. And obviously, as you mentioned here in the notes, I mean, obviously the first point to consider, is this a letdown spot for North Carolina?
This is definitely a letdown spot for North Carolina. I mean, if they come out and play a whole game really motivated here, you have to be really impressed at Roy Williams' coaching job. Obviously, Roy Williams is a good coach. I don't think anybody would deny that he's a good coach. Some people think he's a little bit overrated. Other people don't. I'm not going to really weigh in on that much, just to say that, I mean, he has won a lot. So, he's a good coach. Florida State, really, really talented team. This Florida State team, when you look at their roster, look at Florida State, they're a really good team. I can't believe that they lost 3 games in a row. That Duke loss at home earlier this year sent them for a spiral there for a couple games, to where they lose by 13 on the road to Pitt. They lose by 5 to Boston College, really pretty inexplicable loss. The difference in this game, there's several differences in this game. And one, Roy Williams, I trust him a lot more than I trust Leonard Hamilton. At the same time, Florida State's going to be catching quite a few points here, probably 7, 7.5, 8 points. I think Florida State, their length can bother people. And when I watch Florida State, I think, man, this team could be a really tough out in March. This team has a lot of potential, very long, 13th tallest team in the country. That length gives people a lot of trouble. You remember what Florida State did last year in the NCAA tournament when they went into the tournament with a not that good of a record. I guess they were a 9 seed there, and then they won 3 games, including beating Xavier and Gonzaga, then gave Michigan a hard time there in that game before they ended up losing by 4 points. Florida State's better this year than they were last year. I think Florida State's kind of a sleeper team. Maybe they're not a massive sleeper at this point now that their record's 21-5, but we haven't heard that much about Florida State. The thing that concerns me about Florida State is what I said earlier. I don't think Leonard Hamilton's a very good coach. So you got to try to weigh those positives and negatives here with Florida State, because I think they're certainly capable. In this game, I would certainly lean toward Florida State. Bad letdown spot for UNC. UNC also has not been very consistent this year. We've talked about that in the past, but they have some really good wins this year, obviously, but they also have some games that are really confusing. They barely beat Notre Dame at home. Notre Dame's not good at all this year. They barely beat Miami at home. Miami's not good this year. They lose that game by 21 points at home to Louisville. Louisville's a good team, but you can't lose by 21 points at home. And then they fall apart at the end of the game against Virginia in a game that they were leading much of the game. So, that win at Duke, a really good win, but you have to question, what would have happened if Zion hadn't gotten hurt there at the beginning of that game. I still think that North Carolina deserves a lot of credit for the way that they played after that. So I wouldn't take anything away from them there, but, certainly a question mark how the game would have gone if he didn't get hurt. To me, I have to lean toward Florida State in this game. Florida State, I'm hoping that, you could get 8 points, something like that. If this one comes shorter, 6.5 or 7, I'll probably pass. And I'm curious to see what the odds makers do with this line based on, the letdown spot factor here. And I realize I've probably been rambling a little bit. I was trying to give Adam a break here.
No, it's all good, man. I appreciate it. And, the one question I have is, for North Carolina, I mean, how much of a letdown factor is there when you consider the fact that a lot of people are thumbing their noses at that win, saying, well, Zion Williamson got hurt, so, it doesn't mean as much. And maybe it doesn't. I mean, maybe if Zion Williamson plays that game, Duke wins comfortably, and, especially for it to happen in the first 30 seconds of the game, I mean, that just completely rattles a team like Duke, because you don't know what's wrong with your best player. You don't know if your NCAA tournament hopes just took a major shot. You have no idea. So that kind of rattles you mentally, and North Carolina obviously took full advantage and got way out in front, in the fallout of the injury. But for North Carolina here, you've got a chip on your shoulder with everyone going, well, you only beat Duke because Williamson got hurt. So, does that keep them from the letdown factor here? Does it maybe push that down the line a little bit? I don't know, just to play a little devil's advocate.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would say that I would lean towards no on that, thinking that North Carolina is still coming off that massive win. They have to be pretty proud of how they won that game. The thing that might keep them from it is knowing that Florida State is as good as they are. I mean, both of these teams are 21-5, so it might be a little bit hard to overlook Florida State based on how well they've been playing lately. I think that could be a solid argument. Coming off a 13-point win at Clemson in a game that Clemson really needs to win. I mean, Clemson has found ways to lose games many different ways this year, and that's why they're on the bubble. This Clemson team, 15-11, lost 3 straight after beating Virginia Tech in a game that looked like maybe that would put them back in the NCAA tournament. So Florida State dealt them another blow in that one. Like I said, I really think talent-wise, Florida State should be able to stay within the points here. The one thing that really does concern me is I don't like backing Leonard Hamilton teams very much at all. I think that he is overmatched in this one against Roy Williams, so that's certainly the caveat to this one.
All right, something we talked a lot about here, the quirky schedule for Conference USA and some of the strange things that they have going on here this year, playing a lot of games in a short amount of time, and then now bonus play, where they sort of looked at how the standings have shaken out. They've kind of paired some teams together that way. So we have a couple of Conference USA games to touch on here, beginning with Western Kentucky and Old Dominion.
Yeah, this game is really fascinating. This is probably my favorite one to talk about of the ones that we talked about here today. Western Kentucky was ahead 21-0 over Old Dominion on the road in the first game, loses 69-66. First of all, obviously if you're up 21-0 and you end up losing the game, that's not going to happen very often. And you have to remember a game like that. So now Western Kentucky in this bonus play ends up playing at Old Dominion again, something that you would never see, a team playing at that place, the same place again. If Western Kentucky can't get up for a game like this, what kind of game can they get up for? I mean, they should be really hyped for a game like this. Western Kentucky has been very inconsistent this year. They're certainly a high upside team if you look at Western Kentucky. You don't really know what the floor is with them, though, because, they lose at home to FIU. They lose at home to UAB. Have some good road wins here. They beat Wisconsin also at home in the non-conference slate. They won at Arkansas in a good win. So, Western Kentucky's really inconsistent. I think Old Dominion is a far more consistent team. Old Dominion, really good on defense. Offensively, they've been better this year than what they've been some years in the past, and that's allowed them to have this 21-6 record here. They've won 5 straight games. They've won 9 of their last 10. The only loss they had was at UTSA there, where they were up by 17 points with 3:50 left or something in that game, and they find a way to lose by a point. I think it says a lot, though, about them that they come back and win 5 games in a row after that, because we've seen a lot of teams that have lost a game like that would fall apart there for at least 2 or 3 games, and they didn't do that. So I think this is a Old Dominion team that has a decent amount of experience and is well coached. I have to lean toward Western Kentucky, though, because of the spot. And the other thing I wonder is, if you're liking Western Kentucky here, plus maybe 4.5 points would be my guess here on what this line will be. Offhand, I don't know what the line was the first time they played them here on the road, so I would be curious about that. I think that Western Kentucky, though, could be a good look on the money line if you like them plus the points also, because you're going to be getting a decent number on money line plus price. And you have to think that Western Kentucky puts everything they have into this game. Both teams have had a week to get ready for this. They know they've been thinking about that previous game plenty. Western Kentucky, I believe, has a higher upside than does Old Dominion. I think Western Kentucky is capable of giving a lot of teams in the country a tough game. I think Old Dominion's a good team because they're consistent. I don't think they have quite the upside that Western Kentucky does. The inconsistency is certainly worrying about Western Kentucky, but like I said, if they can't get up for this game, then when will they be able to get up for a game?
Hilltoppers were plus 2.5 in the first meeting between those two teams, and that was way back towards the beginning of conference play. So be interesting to see what happens here with this adjusted line. I was just sort of peeking through some of the schedules here for Conference USA, and this is a little bit more relevant to the next game that we're going to talk about between Rice and UTEP. But Rice and UTEP both close out conference play with home and homes. Rice plays Charlotte, and then UTEP plays Middle Tennessee State. So I guess, the bonus play, they're just kind of, I guess the goal was to group teams that are, sort of similarly matched.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't like the home and home situation. I know that could create some, quick revenge spots. So maybe betting wise, it could be helpful, but I don't like the home and home that quick together. I think that's kind of an odd spot, but hey, Conference USA has been providing us with some good betting opportunities so far this season. So it's certainly going to be interesting to see how this bonus play goes.
All right, so this Rice and UTEP game here, this is another one with a pretty interesting backstory to it.
Yeah, Rice and UTEP, I had to put this one on here. This is certainly the most under-the-radar game we've got here this week. Rice goes back to UTEP, where there was a very questionable, and I think questionable is putting it really nicely, call that went against them to allow UTEP to make a buzzer-beating shot against them earlier this year. You can go back and watch the video in that game. UTEP had a very small amount of time left. They didn't start the clock in time. They went back and reviewed it. They allowed UTEP's shot to count. I believe it was a 3 to win the game by a point. Rice shouldn't have lost that game. They have to be upset about that game. Rice hadn't won a road game in conference or, any kind of Conference USA game on the road for a long time. I don't know what the stats are. Last year, I think they won one game on the road in the conference. And then this year, they have a shot to win that game on the road. They lose it. Now, they did end up winning at Charlotte later in the year, but Rice has to be really, really pumped up for this game. I know they didn't like the way they lost that game. I remember reading the comments from the coaches and the players after that game. I think that Rice will give 100% effort in this game. I'm not necessarily saying that UTEP isn't going to try in this game, and certainly UTEP has a really good home court advantage. So I'm curious to see where this line comes out. I assume UTEP will be favored, but not by very much here. I see Ken Palm has -2. That might be a little bit too high, but -1, something like that. I think that Rice comes into here in a good spot. Rice is upset at the way that they lost the first game. UTEP's not a very good team. They've lost home games to some pretty weak teams this year if you go back and look at their schedule overall. So, they lost the home game to Norfolk State by 13 points. So clearly they're capable of getting beat by just about anybody, even at home. UTEP is so bad offensively, 0.876 points per possession in the conference. Really, really bad there. They're worst in the conference in both 3-point shooting percentage and 2-point shooting percentage. Rice is not very good defensively, but Rice can shoot it pretty well, especially from 3-point range, and pretty good from the free throw line. So I would lean toward Rice in this game, certainly.
One more game to look at here as we go back to the big conferences to finish it out. Michigan State, Michigan, this one coming up here on Sunday. This one in Ann Arbor. So what are you looking for out of these two?
Yeah, I think this is just a fascinating game in that, we really want to see who is the top team in the Big Ten. They're tied at 13-3 in the Big Ten. Purdue at 12-3 in the Big Ten. So this game means a lot. Obviously, anytime Michigan and Michigan State play in basketball at this point, it means a lot. Football also, but both Michigan and Michigan State have been really good programs here for the last few years. I think Beilein's a tremendous coach. Everybody knows that Izzo is a tremendous coach. A really, really good coaching matchup. I love games like this where you get two really good coaches against each other. I would say, Beilein was known for his offensive sets and everything that his team could do on offense for many years, and now the last couple of years they've been better on defense even than on offense. They're second in the country on defense in terms of efficiency so far this year. If you look at Michigan State, they're very balanced, 6th on offense, 7th on defense. Michigan State has some injury concerns here, and that would be what makes me lean toward Michigan in this game. I think that Michigan State is a team that has been a little less consistent than has been Michigan this year. They had that 3-game losing streak to where, how do you lose a game at home against Indiana and then lose at Illinois the next game? They've bounced back pretty well from that, especially with that nice road win at Wisconsin. But I think that this game is one where it would surprise me if Michigan doesn't play pretty well here. I think Michigan, their defense, the fact that they have quite a bit of height, they're very good on the defensive glass. Michigan State likes to take advantage of teams that can't get those defensive boards. They really crash the offensive glass. Michigan is good on the defensive glass, and is what makes them match up better with Michigan State than a lot of other teams do in this league. We'll see who plays and who doesn't here for Michigan State because, like I said, those injury concerns are certainly an issue. And I would say that, if you look at Michigan State as a team, Michigan State has had a little bit more issues than you'd want to have with turnovers so far this year. They're 200th in offensive turnover percentage in the country. For a team that's a top 10 team, that's not very good. So Michigan is third there. I think those extra possessions that Michigan gets by probably winning the turnover battle here and the fact that they're not giving Michigan State those second chance points. Langford's been out for a while for Michigan State, but Nick Ward, a really key guy, I think he's out for a while. I haven't really read an update on that, but I know he has a hand injury. I imagine he won't be playing in this game. So he hurts him quite a bit if he's not playing here, and I think this is a pretty good spot here for Michigan.
Kyle Hunter, professional handicapper at huntersportspicks.com, also daily contributor to BangTheBook.com. What's going on over at your website right now?
Well, I've been on a great run here of late. It's been a great season of college basketball, both on those free picks at BangTheBook.com and the premium selections. 87-54 so far this year on the premium play, 17-4 in my last 21. I'm not one to really beat my chest or to yell about how great I'm doing or anything, because I know this business and that there's going to be streaks and slumps, but certainly been a good season. Happy about that with the amount of time I put into it. You can go over to huntersportspicks.com, check out the lowered prices on the college basketball subscriptions. Also doing a college basketball totals only package for $325 the rest of the year. If you want that one, you can mention Bang the Book. Send me a message at Kyle Hunter Picks or Kyle at huntersportspicks.com. And also sign up for that free picks newsletter over at huntersportspicks.com if you haven't already.
Well, I got to say, man, on a personal level, you helped me out doing an extra video here this week. You've been checking in regularly to see how things are going. It means a lot, brother. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate that. And hopefully, everything goes well with your family and your health, because I know that's been a thing that we've had throughout the winter to deal with. So thanks again, man, so much. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you again on Monday.
All right, thanks. And I hope everybody was fine with me blabbing a little bit extra, and hopefully we can have a more normalized show on Monday, but I think it went fine here today. Thanks, man. We'll talk to you on Monday.